jokes, and I was reading a couple, and many of you know that some churches aren't able to afford to pay their pastor very much. Our congregation is blessed, our people are faithful, the giving is really wonderful here, but there are congregations where they just hardly make a living. And there was one preacher, and he was in his church, and the church was just struggling financially, and his car happened to have some real problems. And so he took it to the mechanic, and the mechanic worked on it, and it took a lot longer than they were expecting, and then the mechanic came out with the bill, and it was astronomical. And the preacher looked at that bill, looked at it again, and then he muttered to the mechanic, "Can you help me with this? Can you get this down? I'm a poor preacher." And the mechanic looked up at him, and he said, "You know, preacher, you're right. I've been to your church. You are a poor preacher." Things humble you. He was a new seminary graduate, and he had graduated from seminary, and he went into his first church, and they had an outreach ministry into the prison. And so his very first time he goes to the prison, and he's preaching to the men, and he says, as in his opening line, "I'm happy to see all of you in here." And then he opened up to his text found in the book of Hebrews, and he read his biblical text. How shall we escape? Well, there was one preacher, he was known for his ability to have a Bible verse for every single occasion. No matter what happened, he'd have a verse of Scripture. And so one hot summer day, as he was preaching, and he was really getting rhetorical, he was getting into his message, all of a sudden, one of those big horse flies flew into his open mouth. He took a big swallow. And then he said to the congregation, "He was a stranger, and I took him in." Well, Peter here is talking about some serious matters with churches and congregations and pastors and preachers. And he begins by implication a really important principle. As he talks about pastoral leadership, he gives us the pattern for pastoral leadership. In verse 1, "To the elder among you," notice these words now, "I appeal as a fellow elder." Wow. I mean, Peter is the most prominent apostle in the Gospels. Almost on every page, there's a mention of his name. Turn to the history of the church, the first 12 chapters of the book of Acts. Peter dominates the story. Peter steps down, puts his arm around those elders, those pastors in Turkey and Asia, who pastor churches maybe of 20, 25, 30 people. And he addresses them as a fellow elder. That's humility. Peter didn't feel like he was way up here and they were way down there. The requisite for pastoral leadership is humility. That's one of the things that I continually ask our Samuel prayer ministry, those close to me, to pray, that we would walk in humility before the Lord. Of all the sins, pride is the most dangerous and the most difficult to see in yourself, and it's very easy to see in others. And so praying that we walk in humility. And then he goes on to talk about suffering. Now, biblical commentators are divided on this. A witness of Christ's suffering. Now, he wasn't at the cross as far as we know. He didn't see Jesus hanging there. You remember, he